There we go. Okay, so quick reminder about what the tracks are. So track one, your first four transactions. Think about it as I want to get into real estate. I don't know anything, or I don't know what I don't know. The point of track one is to teach you how to sell a house. Really, it's to sell four houses, obviously. The other way I look at it is you would take anything you can get at this point. So any buyer, any seller, I'm going to work with them because I don't know what I don't know and I need money. So the first four deals. Track two is going from real estate agent or I can sell something to building a little bit more predictable forms of business. Now we're talking about becoming a real estate professional or a realtor. Obviously, your title doesn't specifically change, and yet that's the methodology behind it. Is now we're starting to learn some systems, some models in place, and implement things where now we can predict where our business is coming from, and we can see a growth pattern or a pathway to scaling our business. And then track three is kind of the hybrid between you're a capping agent or it makes more sense to hire a coach full time for yourself, which translates to more one-on-one coaching and a fixed expense rather than paying a split per sale. Now you're looking at things like a business owner. That's where we start to talk about things like profit and loss statements and models and budgets and how to really grow. So that track three is actually the biggest opportunity for impact on yourselves. The way I like to relate that is going from 0 to 4 sales is about 30 to 40 grand in income. Whereas track three is going from like 50 to 60K in income to over 100. That's where that six figures by design comes from. Going from 8 deals to 20 deals is a bigger impact on most lives than going from 0 deals to 8 deals or 0 deals to 4 deals. So it's meant to kind of ramp up and scale as you go, and you will be growing and learning habits along the way. That being said, most people that are in coaching are brand new, and that's okay because we got to start somewhere. And all of us started somewhere. That first track is also where we identify talent and where we start to kind of learn who is on what path for themselves too. Not everybody wants to start a mega team in real estate, and that's okay. And yet you will still be a business owner even as a solo agent. That's how you focus on profit. Too many times in real estate, people will talk about the volume sold or the number of houses they sold. And while those are cool and that applies to awards and stats and that sort of thing, it doesn't actually generate bottom line because we have expenses we have to worry about. So if you listen to true business owners or coaches in the business, they will talk more about profit. If you ask me how last year went, I will tell you it was my most profitable year ever. Yes, it was my best volume year ever personally. However, it was not my best unit year ever. And I used to have a team that sold 100 houses a year. And I still made more money last year as a solo agent than I did when I had a team doing 100 houses a year because we focused on profit. And so that is where that track three really comes into play. So, with all that being said, let's dive into today. So, today we're talking about Buyer 101. Think back to college course levels of 101 is entry level, 201 is next level up, 301 would be like the graduate or the senior upperclassman type classes. So, I scale these on purpose. We do Buyer 101, 201, 301, and Seller 101, 201, 301. Now, we just finished the Seller one last month in December and January. So now we're going to go back to the buyer ones. Now, these are on the YouTube channel, and yet this is going to replace the old one. So the old one will stay on there to live on there. And yet today we're going to talk a little bit more detail because we've all learned from experiences, and it's going to just be more timely and more relevant. So Buyer 101, somebody raised their hand. They said, I want to buy a house. Where do I start? We're going to go through a little bit of an agenda today, kind of working through somebody start to finish. So you have buyer consultation. That's meeting with them. Now, we'll talk in detail about this in a second, and yet that can be a couple of different meetings. Very rarely does somebody raise their hand and want to buy a house. I meet with them one time, and we're off showing houses. It takes some follow-up opportunities. Sometimes it's like a Zoom or a FaceTime to start, or maybe even a phone call to start, and then we get to the next step, which would be like a coffee, or they're coming to the office, or I'm going to them. Or it might flip. Sometimes we meet in person, we get to know each other a little bit more, and then there's follow-up after that, whether it's a call or a FaceTime or a Zoom or another meeting in person. Then we'll get to pre-approval stuff, talk about the agreement a little bit, and then wrap it up. So let's start with the consultation. This is the most important part. You've probably heard me talk about this on past trainings. The key is to book a face-to-face as soon as you can. Now, technology is your friend, especially when we go through a month of inclement weather where it's not necessarily safe to drive. I did a face-to-face listing slash buyer consult on Saturday on FaceTime. Now, that was because his daughter was sick with the flu. And yet, rather than just reschedule, I said, hey, what if we met on FaceTime today so we can get the ball rolling? And then when your daughter's feeling better, I'll come by your house later this week. And it did. It helped us get a lot further along. His house does not need nearly as much work or improvements to get it ready to sell as he thought. So we got the ball closer to the finish line just by doing a face-to-face Zoom time or FaceTime for about a Zoom time. I sound like a old person, not knowing the difference. FaceTime for about 20 minutes. It was not even really a full appointment. He kind of walked me through the house, asked me a few specific questions. I gave him some tidbits to work with. So the sooner you can get face to face, the better. The other thing too is they can see your mannerisms on FaceTime or on Zoom. They can see that you're relaxed. They can see that you're passionate or energetic. On the phone, sometimes it gets a little bit lost in translation, and it especially does over text. So tonality and emotion behind text is often misjudged. Now, a quick tip there, if you are going to do a phone appointment, not a FaceTime or a Zoom, but on the phone call, old-fashioned way, get up and walk around. It automatically lifts your energy up a little bit. Now, don't go for a power walk where you're going to be out of breath, but just kind of pacing around the room. If you see me at the office and I'm on the phone, I'm oftentimes standing up and walking back and forth around my desk. It's a little trick where it just lifts up your energy a little bit versus if I'm sitting on the phone like this on the chair, like lean back, you're going to hear I'm going to sound a little bit dejected or not interested. Versus if I'm up and walking around, I change inflection a little bit more. I'm getting a little bit more into the call, which is good. That's how it should be. The whole point of that first buyer consultation is to get to know your client and to share anything you can to establish or build rapport. We were just doing this at the start of this call, talking about kids in school. And Jessica and I quickly talked about how we both homeschool. That's an easy way to make rapport. Not to mention something like that, where if it's homeschooling, like you're going to quickly, that's a different type of patience in person. Now, I don't do the homeschooling, my wife does. And yet I support it. Same thing with like number of kids, activities that your kids do, activities that you do, where you went to school, how long you've been in Richmond, how long you've been looking to buy a house, or where do you live currently? Like it's some asking questions or probing thoughts around what they're looking to do. And it's some just personal level. How do I get to know you? How do we build rapport? I always say, you're not obligated to work with every buyer you talk to, just like they're not obligated to use you as their agent. And the way that conversion rate goes up, we talked about conversion rate a couple weeks ago, is by building rapport. This is the power of video too, which we've talked about in other lead generation topics. The reason why I have so many videos and I put all these trainings out on YouTube is because a prospective client can go watch those and see how I interact with people. And I'm myself, I'm authentic on camera, just like I'm authentic with you guys, just like I'm authentic in person. And so now when I go on appointments, they go, I feel like I already know you. And that's the most powerful thing I can hear because it's good. That's what they should be saying. That's the power of social media and video. Sorry, cleaning my screen off for a second. Now, this is also where you can start to set expectations for your process and how you can best serve. Now, we've talked about this before. One of the most powerful tools you can use in any meeting is asking questions. The more they talk and the less you talk, the more they're going to feel like they bond with you. I know it's a little bit of a kind of counterintuitive thought process there. And yet we don't want to be talking and selling them on working with us. We want to be asking them questions and getting them to answer us and talk more. If they drive the conversation, they will feel very important and heard, and you're taking notes, and your conversion rates will go up. One of the easiest ways to start this is by saying, tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell me a little bit about the home you're looking for. As they start to tell you things, take notes and ask probing questions. They may say, we want a 2-story home. We want at least 3 bedrooms, at least 2 full baths. We could do 1.5, but we really want 2. Good school district, safe neighborhood. That's where you can say things like, how about a garage? Is that a must-have for you? What about a fenced-in yard? If it's not fenced but could be, is that something that you'd be willing to look past? You're asking questions to get them to answer you. The other thing that I like to do here in this initial call is tell me a little bit about what you've heard about buying a house. Or do you have any questions from the jump about buying a house? Oftentimes, this is where they'll start to say things like, do I really need 20% down to buy a house? Or I don't have the money to buy a house. Well, tell me why you think that. Don't just say, you know, you don't need 20% down to buy a house. Ask them what they're planning on putting down, or ask them where they're at with their finances, or if they've talked to anybody about buying a house. Now, anybody is intentionally vague. We want to end this call with the next step, which I'll talk about here in a second. And yet the buyer consultation is probing them for information about them, about what they're looking for, about their timeline. You don't need to give them information yet. That's what the follow-up is for. Now, we'll give them a little bit about ourselves, how long you've been in the business, or what got, if you've only been in it for a little bit or a short time, or you're brand new, tell them what got you into real estate or why you enjoy real estate. It's a little bit different answer to the same question. I don't need to come out and say that I've been doing it since 2011, but I can say I grew up in the industry, or I've always been interested in real estate. Or a better way of saying this that I recommend to new agents is, I'm in real estate because I want to help people accomplish their dreams of owning a home. If it's a first-time home buyer, add that to it. I'm especially passionate about working with first-time home buyers because it's the greatest impact that can have on your wealth. It's by buying your first house. None of that says how long I've been doing it or that I'm brand new, and they don't really need to know that. Now, if they ask, don't lie. That's where you can also lean on the fact that A, you have a coach, B, you have a broker and leadership support team, and you have agents in the office that can help get you across that finish line.
And can I add something here?
Please
Uh,
do.
One thing that I did when I first became an agent, in my first full year of being an agent, I sold 15 homes. One of the things that really helped, as soon as they wanted to know how long I had been in business, I would say, I am on a, if whether I was on a team or whether I was just in a brokerage, I would get the stats of my brokerage. So if my brokerage sold 500 homes that year, I said I'm on a brokerage that has sold 500 homes. We've helped 500 families get homes, and you have the full support of my brokerage behind you. And that has usually been very strong in helping them. Like they usually don't go and say, but how long have you been doing it? That's usually enough for them.
That's a great point. And that's the whole like build this team thing. We are on a team. I know you're not technically on a individual team, or you're not on Pretty Properties or William Close Group or Eden Prop, well, Dean is, or Eden Properties, et cetera. And yet you can lean on that. So if you are on a team, lean into the team stats too. And if you're not on a team, this is your team. KW Metro Center. That's one of the value adds for being with the brand. Not to mention, and this is a little bit personal too to myself. So for those of you that don't know, I started my first eight and a half, almost 9 years in the business with my dad's company. He runs an Exit Realty franchise. My dad has constantly been top 3 agent within Exit internationally every year. So I grew up under the impression that like Exit's huge, Exit's a big brand because we went to all the things. He was a top ranking agent. It would be like being in Gary's top 10. And so everybody knows who the top agents within Keller Williams are if you're in that world, because all it is talked about. It's like, these people sold 2,000 homes last year. And so you hear about them. Now, the irony of it is my dad's team does about 150 deals a year. And so that was the big fish to me. That was the whale. And so I would go meet with people, especially out of state and yet also out of our market. And I would talk about Exit Realty and they'd go, I've never heard of it. And I'm like, really? You've never heard of Exit Realty? It's kind of big. It's in the United States and Canada. Like it's a big brokerage. Well, as soon as I came to Keller Williams, everybody's heard of Keller Williams. And even if they haven't, they're like, oh yeah, I think I know what that is. Like there was none of that. Like, oh, I've never heard of Exit. It was, and not to mention the office that I first went to had 3 or 4 teams doing more than my dad's team did in that office, let alone the $175,000 agent or 175,000 agents within Keller Williams. So you start living in a bigger ocean or a bigger pond, so to speak, of different agents. Well, that brand recognition can help you as well. And so there are only really 3 to 4, maybe 5 brands in real estate that are that way everywhere, and Keller Williams is one of them. Even though like popular ones nowadays, like I've talked to people that have never heard of EXP or have never heard of Real. If you step 2 or 3 lines outside of the industry, they don't know what that is, even though it's all we hear about in our industry. And this is not to poke fun at EXP or Real. They're just newer and there's a lot of movement there. And so lean on that. as a new agent, lean on the fact that you're with Keller Williams. Now, if you say KW Metro Center, they may go, what's that? You can say it's a market center, it's a brokerage within Keller Williams. I also use this to help further build rapport with clients too. So an example here is I have a client that past client, I sold them their first house here. They want to move back to Northern Virginia. Well, guess where about 700 of our agents are? Northern Virginia. We have 800 agents in KW Metro Center's world. 100 of them are in Richmond. So do that math. So I told them that. I was like, well, I have a partnership with about 700 agents all around Northern Virginia. They already have an agent they want to work with because that's who referred them to me in the first place. So I was like, are you working with Liz again? They're like, yeah. Okay, well, I'll reach out to Liz. And at the same time, I'll reach out to my partnership to see if we can find any off-market homes that could work for you. So you can build some of this rapport just by leaning into the team or the support that you have behind you. Now, one last little tab on the buyer consultation too is this is where the wants and needs analysis comes into play, which I kind of touched on earlier. Asking them what they're looking for in a home and just being quiet and listening as they give you things. Now, as they start to pause or they start to kind of slow down, that's where you can ask those probing questions to get a couple of other answers out. There are tons of good templates. You can probably just Google them of like buyer need sheet or buyer wants and need sheet and just download a template you like. It doesn't need to be crazy or fancy or branded. The whole point is you want to have an idea of what are they looking for in a home. The more detail you can get here, the better, not to mention the more they will tell you. Another question that I like to include here is, are you looking to be within a certain distance of something? And I'll intentionally say something, and then I'll give them examples. School, a job, a family member, an area of activity. So like my daughter plays Little League softball and she plays it year round. So we want to be within 15 minutes of the softball fields. Okay, great. Where are those at? Tucko Little League. Okay, great. I can help build a search or a parameter around that to keep your search needs within that time frame. I intentionally, with buyers, don't bring up pricing or budget until the end of the call. I want to get to know them and get to know as much about what they're looking for until the end of the call. Two reasons why. Number one, which we'll talk about more in detail in a second, is it's a great handoff for a next step, which is connecting them with a lender if they haven't already been there. Number two, if I ask them in the beginning, if they thought about a budget, if they have a price in mind, let's just say hypothetically they say, yep, we don't want to go over 300,000. And then they give me a needs list that's going to put them at 700,000. I'm now responding to the call and finishing the call with trying to curb their expectations. And that can hurt your conversion rate. Because now you may say, I don't want to say condescending, but you may sound like you're making it, or like it's going to be harder than it should be to achieve that needs list. Let the houses and let the lender be the one that sets those realistic expectations. An example would be, I have a client that's reading me their wish list and they're 5 to 6 bedrooms, 3,000 square feet, 2-car garage. We want a pool. We want a fenced in yard. We want good school districts. They're telling me all these things. If they've already told me their budget and I know that house doesn't exist in that budget, well, I don't want to answer that now because I want to get them as a client and then let the market dictate where they're going to be. Because I may be able to get them in contact with a lender. Lender's going to be a lot more detailed about what their budget actually is and where they want to be. Then once we start looking at houses, now this could be just virtually looking at houses. I'm sending them options or they're setting themselves up on a search. They may self-select out of some of those needs. They may go, okay, we really wanted a pool and yet our budget's 400,000. We're not going to get a pool in that budget. Or I just went through this last year with a client, like they wanted to be move-in ready, all the renovations done and in a certain neighborhood. But then they told me they didn't want to go over a certain price. Now, we looked for 6 months, and yet we had several conversations around, these are your 4 top items. One of them is going to have to give. Which is the least important to you? And it ended up being the move-in ready part. They were willing to look past some of that and say, okay, we can paint or we can change some countertops and some carpet out. If the price is right, the area is right, and the house is right, that's the most important. Where I've had other buyers go, you know what? It's our first house. We don't even have kids yet. maybe we lessen the restrictions on the school because we have 5, 6, 7 years before anybody's going to be in elementary school anyways. Let's get the house we want, the price we want, and not have to do any work. And so don't worry about budget in the beginning. I like to ask this question towards the end. Okay, Mr. Buyer, we've talked a lot about what you look for in a house and where you want to be. Have you talked to anybody about financing yet? Or do you have a budget in mind of what you'd like to spend? If they tell me no, they haven't talked to anybody, and or they say, yes, we don't want to spend above, and they give me a price, that's where I say, have you thought about a down payment yet? Or do you have a monthly payment you don't want to go above? Because that also can set some expectations. So for example, if they say, we don't want to go over 400,000, and I say, great, have you thought about a down payment? Well, not really. We're saving now. Okay, let me ask you differently. Have you thought about a monthly payment that you'd be comfortable with? Yeah, we don't want to go over 1,500 a month. Okay, well, those two things aren't in alignment. Now, I'm not going to tell them that. I'm going to say, great, can I get you in touch with my preferred lender so he can go over those options? Because to be honest with you, you're thinking about this the right way. Your monthly payment is actually the budget you live within. Purchase price is one thing, and yet all that does is dictate the pieces to the puzzle. You don't buy a house for 400,000 unless you're paying all cash. You buy a house for your loan, and your loan can be chopped up a bunch of different ways. So if you're concerned about monthly payment, let's get you in touch with a lender and let them explore your options to get you your best monthly payment. Now, between us on this call, if they tell me 400,000 and then tell me 1,500, well, they're going to have to put like $200,000 down. So if they don't have that, I don't want to be the one to share that with them. They may connect with the lender and then come back to you and say, hey, after talking with the lender, our budget's actually 300,000. And then you say, okay, no problem. That's why we connect you with the lender too. And I tell buyers, the last thing I want is for you to be house poor. I'm not going to put you into a house just to complete a sale and you have to struggle to make the mortgage payment every month. That's what you live in. That's what I mean by that's where your budget lies. So let's find a house that's the mortgage payment that you're comfortable paying. And then we can work the other pieces out. Now, depending on your lender, talk to your preferred lenders. Most of them want a introduction via like a group text or a group email where everybody's copied on the same line of communication. So like my preferred lender, I do a text and I'll say, hey, Jessica, meet Jackson. Jackson, meet Jessica. Can you two set up a time to talk? Jessica's looking for her new home. And Jackson will reply and book a call. Or if it's John in the office, I think John and them like email, but you can also do text with them too. Say, hey, here's John. He's with the primary. John, can you book a call with Joel? He's looking to buy his first house. The more details you can kind of tee up there too is important. So like if they're a first-time home buyer, I'll include that in the message. I'll say they're looking to buy their first house. Or they're looking to buy a new home. They have to sell their house first. We're working on that step too. Wanted to get them in touch with you so they can start building a budget. Here's what I expect their proceeds to be if you know that answer already. Does that make sense kind of where I'm going with all that? Like the more introduction you can do, the better. They may have financing questions. Sometimes you can answer those. A lot of times I say, look, I lean on my partners for that side of things. I stay in my lane where my job is to find you the house that checks all your boxes within your budget. We work as a team with our preferred lenders to determine what that budget is where you feel most comfortable. And then I do that. I get out of the way and let them be the budget side. Now let's talk a little bit about what that lender is going to provide. I just talked about the lender referral. That's the most important part. Some of the things that I like to use as this kind of handoff is to say, hey, the lender is going to be able to, and I use the analogy or the metaphor of a puzzle a lot because I've stolen that from lenders. And yet the loan process is a puzzle. There's a lot of factors that go into play there. Down payment, interest rate, taxes and insurance on the property, like all of these, if there's an HOA or not, all these pieces go into that total monthly payment. Now, HOA is a little bit different, but same thing. And so you want to kind of discuss these with the lender and with the buyer to figure out where they're going to be most comfortable. Third-party websites, things like Zillow, are quoting estimated payments on their websites when they look at a house. And so a lot of times that's where buyers are getting their information. And the problem is you don't know the interest rate, and 9 times out of 10, that's assuming 20% down. So if a buyer's putting less money down, the payment's going to be a little bit higher. And so we want to make sure they're shopping in a budget they're comfortable with. And I use that as the reason why we're going to hand it off. Not to mention, I explained to them, and typically the lender will reiterate this, we're going to need a pre-approval letter before we submit any offer. So let's get our ducks in a row before we start looking. You can use this as a follow-up too to discuss where the market is. So for example, if they tell you they're looking in Glen Allen, well, homes are selling pretty quickly in Glen Allen right now. And so we want to use that to set expectations with our buyer. Hey, Mr. Buyer, just so you're aware, average days on market and where you're looking is about 5 to 7 days. Homes are selling very, very quickly. So we want to make sure we have our ducks in a row. So when you see a house and then you like it, we can put our offer in. It's not to say that it's always a multiple offer or a bidding war scenario. I don't want you to be spooked or thinking you're going to have to overpay. We can talk about those details once we start looking at houses. And things are selling quickly though. So we want to make sure we're not trying to get pre-approved after looking at a house. This will also protect you as an agent because you want to make sure they're pre-approved or pre-qualified before you look at a house. Now, there are differences there. The easiest way to think about it is there's two easy ways. Number one is relating it to buying a car. If you go on any dealer's website, you can get pre-qualified with no impact to your credit score. Think about that as when a buyer gets pre-qualified for a house or a car, you're telling them everything about you. You're telling them how much money you make. You're telling them what your credit score approximately is, or a range, maybe. Sometimes you don't even do that part. You're telling them where you want to be or what car you want, but it's all coming from you. You haven't sourced or proven anything. They also typically don't run your credit. So it's not as accurate or it's not as valid as an approval is. The other way I look about doing this, and I don't tell buyers this part, but it's for my own psyche, is a pre-qualification means there's no proof that they make that kind of money. It's especially prevalent with like 1099 employees. So anybody in sales, self-employed borrowers. So like myself, I'm a good example of this. Like my bank statements or my profit and loss statement look like I make a lot of money, but when it comes tax time, we do a whole bunch of deductions. So the tax return doesn't show that I made the money that it looks like I made on paper last year. That's because I don't want to pay Uncle Sam as much as I would if I claimed everything. And yet claimed income is typically what's used for a loan approval. So if I do a pre-qualification, and I'm just throwing out a random number here, this is not accurate, and I say I made $500,000 last year because that's what my GCI was. And then it comes time to prove, and it says I made 225 after all the deductions and expenses and everything went out. Well, that's two different budgets. I can buy a really big house at 500 grand a year, and I can buy a kind of big house at $225,000 a year. And so pre-approval is going to be more important. Not to mention they're going to know your credit score there. If you're buying with a partner, spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, co-borrower, doesn't matter. Both credit scores are going to have to be included in that, and they're going to take the middle one of lower person more often than not, or an average between the two, depending on loan type. So sometimes I'm going to pick on Joel just because he's first on the screen. Sometimes you're looking at a buyer and Joel's filling out the pre-qualification and he's not bringing in his partner yet. And Joel has really good credit. Well, his partner has a bunch of student loans and his score's not as good. And so when they do the pre-qualification, Joel looks great on paper. Then it comes out that, I want to put my partner or my wife or my spouse on it. And they're the ones with student loans or they're the ones with the lower credit score. Well, now it's going to impact the approval a little bit. Sometimes it just results in a higher interest rate. Sometimes it does lower the purchase price. The lender is going to discover all these things, and they can also work a plan to get it higher. So like I have a client right now that wants to buy the house that he's renting, and he's approved now. He hates the rate he's approved with, and it's because his credit score is kind of low. So the lender and him are working through a plan to improve his credit score over the next 60 days. So A, he can buy at a better rate, and B, he can buy before his lease ends, which is when the owner of the property wants to put the house up for sale anyways. Some of these questions have been brought up on like the Facebook group or on email. Best like source for credit repair. There's a bunch out there. I lean on the lenders or who to refer to for that for a couple of reasons. Number one, they typically have the better relationship with credit repair people because credit repair folks are reaching out to the lenders to establish that relationship. Credit repair folks, if they're smart and have good business practices, that's where their referrals are coming from, is the lender side. Also, some companies have it in-house, or they may have a couple of different options depending on what it is. So like if you have some credit card movement that you can do, such as opening up a new one and building a balance up and paying it off and paying off this one, but not closing it, that will be different than let's get our student loan payments adjusted. Or you have something on your credit report that shouldn't be on there. That's a different type of repair. Now, it's not to say that you might not have a credit repair person. And if you establish a relationship with someone or you've sent people somewhere, then that's great. Like Katrin, who's not on the call today, she has somebody that she's connected with, but it was a referral from her lender. So now they kind of have this little triangle relationship. So Katrin doesn't need to go call my lender, then call the credit repair person. She can just directly get them to the credit repair person. Depending on loan type, there are minimums for where credit scores should be. The other challenge that you may run into is some of those third-party sites like Credit Karma, or even the ones that are provided through like a credit card app, they are quoting a score that's 30 days behind. So you might be on like a Capital One credit card app making your payment, and it says, check your free credit FICO credit score, your credit score. And you pull it up, and it's like, oh, sweet, I got a 725. Well, that's last month's score. And so it's going to be a little bit delayed, whereas a lender is going to run a credit report from the 3 credit bureaus and get an accurate score. Typically, it's an average of the 3: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Now, you don't have to know all of these things necessarily. If you are curious about being really on the know and in the details on this, I recommend agents anyways, and this would be a good practice for all of you. Go get coffee or lunch with the lender partner and ask them some of these questions. Before you even get to those questions, though, I like to ask, how would you like to be introduced to a buyer lead? Tell me a little bit about your process. What can I do to make the process smoother for both of us? The stronger relationship you can have with the lender, the higher your conversion rate too, because they're going to make you look good. That's their job.
And I'd like to add something here too, if I could.
Please. Yes.
One of the biggest objections I had, and I still occasionally have with buyers who go, when I tell them they need to talk to a lender, is they go, well, I don't want to do that yet until I look at some houses first. And so, of course, Austin just talked to you guys, which is very true, letting them know that sellers don't want their homes shown unless the buyer has been pre-approved. That's a great thing to tell them. The other thing I tell them is I prepare them. I said, listen, we want to get pre-approved, like Austin so eloquently described the difference between pre-approval and pre-qualification. I said, we want to get pre-approved, and I explained to them the difference. And then I really hone in on the fact that they're going to find out their budget and they're going to love knowing what their budget is before they go out to look at homes. And the other thing I tell them is, listen, when you talk to your lender, they're going to ask for everything except your firstborn, and they may ask for that. And I just throw that in as a joke. I have found that really helped because sometimes buyers would come back to me and say, it's ridiculous the stuff they want. I don't need to go through all that. All I want to do is look. When I prepare them, they're totally fine. They're like, yep, you were right. This is what they're asking for. So setting their expectations with the lender has been very helpful.
Yes, it is. And that's something you can get out of that meeting with the lender too. So you sit down with them and you say, hey, what does it you look for in a buyer, or what can I do to set expectations clearly with the buyer before they come about? Now, a couple things in the chat recommending lenders. You guys are open to use whoever you want. We do have a preferred partner in our office, which is John Regano with Primary. They sponsor a lot of things. They do things like marketing and Popeyes for us. They do just sold or just listed cards for us. So that should always be your first step. They are also actively looking for a lender to have in the office on behalf of them. So I know right now it's a Northern Virginia team. They are actively looking to put somebody in our office to be that like hands-on person. So definitely start there. They are going to be able to do more things than most because they're a preferred partner as well, such as things like give credits when needed to make up the differences and that sort of thing. That being said, it doesn't hurt to have a team. Like I have 3 to 4 lenders I work with. There's two that get about 90% of the business, and then the others are like backup options. And it's also good to kind of diversify personality types too. And things like not to be sexist. However, some buyers only want to work with a female or they only want to work with a male. And so you want to be able to pair them up accordingly. And then lastly, there will be certain things that certain lenders can offer that others can't, such as grant programs, or first time homebuyer assistance and that sort of thing. So just kind of be prepared for that. And I would start with a couple of options. And then they'll help you set those expectations. So once you have the pre-approval, and once you've kind of started setting up a search, which we'll talk about more detail here in a second, you have to get a buyer broker agreement signed. Now, I'm going to speak with my broker hat on for a second, and then I'm going to take it off and speak to you as a coach. Broker hat on, this must be signed before you step foot into any house with any agent or with any client as their agent, with one exception. You're attending an open house, or they are attending an open house. So buyers can go to open houses unrepresented. They don't need to sign a buyer agreement to go to open houses. You can also go to open houses with the buyer without having an agreement signed. However, if you're going to represent them as an agent at the open house, I'd recommend having the buyer agreement signed. Taking the broker hat off for a second, putting my coaching hat on. I don't like to throw paperwork in someone's face as soon as I meet them. So I will typically do the first 2 steps we've talked about already without a buyer broker agreement. Now, I will mention it in the buyer consultation. I may even have one in the buyer consultation to show them. I will then say, we got to get this signed before we start showing houses. Right now, let's get to know each other, make sure we're a good fit for each other. I'll get you in touch with some of our preferred partners. We'll build a plan together. Once it's time to start looking at houses, we'll get this thing knocked out. And then you can also ask, do you have any questions about the agreement? Now, we have a YouTube link where I talk about how to fill this out, so I'm not going to do this detail here. You also want to upload it to Command under Opportunities. Again, separate training. That being said, it is required. It is a big deal, and you should have it signed.
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm working with a lot of first-time home buyers where that process may take months to do,
Yep.
and just a couple of weeks. So what type of date do you put on that for a long-term process?
Yeah, so whenever they're willing to sign it, I want to get it signed. And there's nothing wrong with putting a year on there.
Okay.
Typically, I'll put a year if they like are pushing back for whatever reason, or if they're like hot and ready to go, I'll put 6 months. But that's normal. Now you can put single family home, you can put condo townhouse, you can also put specific addresses. The problem is you have to sign one every time you're showing a house. But sometimes, like if it's an internet lead or something of that nature, they're like, I just want to sign one for this house. Or I just want to look at this house. If this house doesn't work out, we're not buying it. Okay, well, can we sign an agreement for this house so I can represent you on this house? I don't love doing that as a coach or as an agent. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. However, if it's a difference between getting that lead and showing that house and not, sign it for that property. Typically, you can get it signed for a longer period of time without any pushback. Also, with this buyer broker agreement, when I present it to them, I say, hey, this is you committing to me as your agent and me committing to you as your agent. What that means for you is it allows me to go to bat for you. I can do things like search off market properties, connect with the for sale by owners, and coming soon listings. So I can show you more inventory than I can if we're not in agreement. If we're not in agreement, meaning I'm not under contract to work for you, we're basically going to plug things into MLS searches and apps, and you can use Zillow and those type of things to find properties. And then when you're ready to go show houses, we're going to sign this anyways. If we partner up now, it's you committing to me and me committing to you, and it allows me to go work harder for my clients, such as finding things that are going to fit your needs that aren't on the market yet. That almost always gets them to go, well, yeah, why wouldn't I want to see more options and sign listings or sign an agreement to see more listings? Couple things on that. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
My 2 cents also, when I first started real estate, I did not understand that I needed to explain what the buyer brokerage was and what it was saying. So I didn't, and my client didn't understand it. She just signed it. And she was at church one day, and her friend said, my realtor just listed a house. Her realtor showed my client the house, and I lost that deal. So really, it's important that they know and understand why they're signing it and how this is an agreement between you two.
Yes, yes, great point. And it is an agreement and it's a commitment. So they're committing to work with you. Now, couple things there is I do say that this can be canceled at any time because it can. Um, a lot of times people ask, like, well, is this saying that this says here that I'm going to pay you 3%? And that's where you go into the conversation, which we'll do more training around this, especially if you take Catherine's class on it, in addition to the buyer consultation training, which we'll do at a future date. You only pay my commission if the seller won't. So we're going to ask on the contract that the seller covers my compensation so you don't have to pay it. By the way, I have a 100% track record of getting the seller to pay my compensation. I've sold over 400 homes. Now, they're not all buyers. But even on the seller side, seller pays the buyer compensation. Occasionally, they pay less than what's asked for. I don't always get 3%. And then you have a choice whether you want to ask the buyer to pay the difference. Depending on the buyer, they may have the cash to do the difference. As your coach, I recommend saying this, because this is what I do in my business, and it actually works. Because they'll say this. The buyer may say, well, what happens if they are only offering 2% or 2.5%? According to this, I have to pay the difference. I say, I make an agreement or a deal with all of my clients. I will not charge you the difference if you can guarantee me a referral. And it works. And then I make like a little jokey joke there, and I say, because 2.5% or 2% for two people is more than 3% from one person. And they go, oh, yeah. I'm like, I'm serious. And that gives me a referral opportunity from the next person too. And that's how you scale by referral. And you make the buyer feel like you're doing them a favor, which you are. There's also a saying that I've joked with Catherine about because we kind of both were brought up under the same saying. A fast nickel is better than a slow dime. And what we mean by that is don't let a 0.5% or even 1% be the reason why you can't get a buyer under contract, because 3% of zero is still zero. So if they really love that house, we got to make it happen. I will also share with buyers, I will never let my commission or compensation be the reason we don't get the house that you're interested in. If the seller is refusing to pay buyer broker compensation, we will have that discussion when that house presents itself. And then I'll usually go into by the way, I have a 100% track record of the seller covering my fee. There are tools that you can use to get that covered, such as increasing the purchase price by 2% and getting the seller to agree then. Or there are other factors at play there. Maybe you meet in the middle. You get a 1% higher and they pay 1% or something of that nature. Now, that being said, we do have a floor, meaning without explicit approval, you are supposed to get a minimum of 2% buyer agent compensation on your deals. That is to protect the agent. On the listing side, it's 2.5%. This is not a listing call training. This is the buyer call training. So we're going to talk about 2%. If it is less than 2% for any reason, just bring that up to your to the broker, Catherine, and she'll get it approved if need be. All right, a couple more slides. We're going to move a little quicker here because I just noticed the time. So showings. We'll talk about this a lot more in detail on the 201 training. And yet you want to exhaust all options to expose them to inventory. And you want to do the best you can to keep them off of sites like Zillow or Homes.com because they have sponsored agents on there and you don't want them contacting agents, or a digital version of what Jessica shared happening, where they go online, they see a Zillow listing, they text the agent because it just says request a showing right here, and they don't know any better. So they request a showing and that listing agent calls them and shows the house. Now you've lost a buyer. Okay. I share this with people by saying, and we'll do another training on how to set up your KW app, but I say, hey, I'm going to send you my app. I want you to log in and use it. 2 reasons. It communicates directly with me. I can see what you're looking at. You can request showings directly on the app. It follows you wherever you go. So if you're in the West End and want to look at houses over there, you can pull it up. If you're in North Chesterfield, it'll follow you there. If you're in Powhatan, it'll follow you there. If you're in Kentucky, it'll follow you there. Although I can't help you in Kentucky. Ha ha ha. The other thing it'll do is it'll keep you off Zillow, so you're not getting spammed by other agents. We just talked about the buyer broker agreement. You're committed to working with me. I'm committed to working with you. I'm going to get you the best deal. Here's a free tool you can use. This is not to say that I'm not going to be emailing you criteria as well. I'll be emailing you houses on the MLS. Coaching tip, I don't set up an auto search unless they specifically ask for one. I like to manually search because I like to filter out houses that may or may not work for them for a variety of reasons. For example, house looks perfect in the pictures and the price is really good. And then I scroll down and read the agent-only comments and realize it's a HUD property with a 10% buyer premium and it's going to be a bidding war. Well, I'm not going to send that to my buyer if it's not going to fit their needs. If they don't have the cash to pay the 10% buyer premium, they may ask about it. And then you have a conversation with them about that. Same thing if it says something like multiple offers in hand, offers due by 5 p.m. today. Well, if they're asking to see it tomorrow, I don't need to include that in the search. That's called getting your buyer's hopes up when they can't actually act on it. Make sure you have your updated Century Connect or Century Lock app on your phone. Again, we'll go through that with the training too. When you do your MLS orientation, they should go over that for you. But that's how you access showings. That's going to be in the 201 training next week. And then offer, again, going to be in the 201 training, but the only thing I really want to point out here for offer and for showings, before you make an offer on any property on behalf of a buyer, please call the listing agent. You can text them if you can. Best practice, though, is text them and try to get it to a call. They will tell you more on the phone than they will in writing. So the text may say, hey, just showed 123 Main Street. Buyers really liked it, thinking about an offer. Is there anything you can tell me that would help us? Let me know if a call works better. Send. Or can I call you in a few minutes to discuss? Send. Most agents will say yes. Or they'll just give you the information you're looking for. Like me personally, I get permission from all my sellers to be transparent about all the offers we have in hand. It's in my listing agreement. So when an agent texts me and says, do you have any offers in hand? I go, yep, we're about 10% over asking. If you can beat that, we'd love to work together. Not every agent will do that. I don't know why. That's a conversation for another day. And yet you want to communicate. There are a few things more frustrating in the world than when I get an offer with no communication from the agent before it comes in. Unless it's a really kick you-know-what offer. Then I'm not quite as frustrated. And yet an open line of communication will help you go a long way. It'll also save you time in the long run. Such as if you find out there are other offers, or if the seller needs a specific closing date, et cetera, et cetera. These will all be covered in the 201 training next week. Or in details. All right, a couple more helpful tips, then we'll have any Q&A and then be done. Encourage drive-by of homes. This is also an easy way to avoid a steering or ethics violation on your part. If a buyer says, is that a safe neighborhood? You should not say yes or no. You should say, drive by the homes and get a feel for the neighborhood prior to showing. Oftentimes, buyers can rule a home in or out just by driving by the exterior. Oh, it's on a terrible corner lot. We didn't realize that from the pictures. We can cross that one off the list. Or you can look into the neighbor's mirror or window from the backyard. It's too close. We're going to take that one off the list. Or that's not the neighborhood we want to be in. So encourage drive-by homes prior to showing, especially if they are looking at a lot of houses or want to look at a lot of houses. I recommend a max of 3 to 5 showings in a single day. And I'll tell buyers this, depending on the proximity of the drive between them as well. This is not because I don't want to spend the whole day with you. It's because eventually housing features start to run together. I really like the master bath in that house, and I can't remember if it was the first house or the second house. Or did that one have central air? Or did that one have an electric heat pump or a gas heat pump? Some of the stuff we can find out from the MLS. And yet you want to look at looking at houses as a process of elimination, not a process of selection. If it's a process of selection, they will keep looking until the pigs fly because they're going to keep looking for that perfect house. There is no perfect house. Even if you build from scratch, it's still not perfect because it's going to be too expensive. And so I tell buyers, we want to be ruling out homes that don't work and be getting closer to the house that does. The easiest way to do this is to stick with about 3 to 5 showings in a single day. Not to say we're not going to look at more than 3 to 5 homes. We'll just do it over the course of a couple of days. If we look at 3 to 5 today and none of them work, well, then we'll set up another day to look at others. Typically, we might be able to keep 1 or 2 on the list. Then maybe we look at 2 or 3 others with this one as a second show. You want to stay in touch regardless of timeline. These are your follow-up opportunities. Once they've raised their hand and they want to buy a house, that is gold. Follow up with them more than just about anything else. Now, obviously, if they say we're in a lease until December 2026, maybe you don't call them every week, and yet you should stay in touch monthly. Because as that timeline progresses, they may be able to move sooner. For example, if you found the perfect house and it was within budget, would you be willing to break your lease early and move in? P.S. I've had some luck in the past with the sellers covering that lease break cost or fee. They would be a fool to say no, although sometimes people say, you know what, we're just going to ride out our lease, or we can't find that perfect house, and so we're going to keep looking. That's okay. This gives you another follow-up opportunity. Discuss costs often, especially on those properties that are in hotter areas. We'll talk about this some more next week once we go from agreement to under contract. And then I like to give success stories similar to their situation. Sorry, that's so much alliteration. It originally said share success stories similar. That's just too many S's. So I changed it to give. And what I mean by that is use other examples, even if it's people on these calls. Hey, a team member of mine just helped the buyer get under contract and the seller's giving them 10 grand in credits. They're taking 3 grand of that to get out of the lease early because it's the perfect house. If I could find something similar for you, would that work? Yeah, I didn't even know that was possible. And now you're creating a sense of urgency for your buyer, which is good for you as the agent. All right, for sake of time, we'll wrap up there. We'll go in more detail on once you have the agreement signed, kind of post-consultation through the showing process and getting under contract in 201. And then 301 is going from under contract to close. That's where we'll talk details about inspections and appraisals and repair requests and those type of things. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to add to Buyer 101?
I have a
We
question.
did that. Yes, go ahead.
So I have a lot of pretty much all of everybody I'm working with are first time home buyers, and what I'll see is I don't have an issue getting them pre-qualified. It's the barrier between getting all of the information necessary to get pre-approved and moving on to the buyer agreement. What type of language or follow-up process can I put in there to kind of speed that up?
Yeah, so one of the things, and Jessica touched on this a little bit earlier, one of the things is using your lender partner to help set clear expectations. The easiest way that I communicate it to buyers is saying a pre-approval will be required for you to put an offer on a home. There are listing agents out there, I'm one of them, who will not accept a contract with a pre-qualification letter. It needs to be a pre-approval. And it's because of what you just said. They have not provided their proper documentation to go from a pre-qualification to a pre-approval, which is what's needed to write an offer. The other thing will be leaning into that buyer broker agreement. Typically, I do this in steps. So we're going to focus on the pre-approval first. Then once we start looking at how, or once we get past that and we're ready to start looking at houses, that's when we bring back up the buyer broker agreement to say this is going to be needed in order for us to show any houses. What concerns or questions do you have around signing the buyer broker agreement? That's something I would ask them. And if they answer, you can navigate a couple different ways. But if they say the fee or paying the fee, you can say, well, that fee is not paid until closing. So it's after we found the house and it's paid at settlement. and our team has a 100% track record of getting the seller to cover our fee. So it's not necessarily something you would have to pay out of pocket. I know the agreement says so. However, if the seller covers it, you don't pay 3% on top of that. The seller pays my fee. This is just to clearly communicate how I get paid in the agreement.
And I would add, like I have a client right now who is a first-time home buyer, Joel, and he basically shared with me enough to know that we definitely want a pre-approval before we go look at homes. So I said, listen, I'm going to send you to my lender and he's going to get that pre-approval for you. Now he is going to underwrite you. So that means that you're going to give him all this information so that when you're ready to purchase that home, we don't have anything inhibiting you getting that offer in. And the offer is exactly what you feel comfortable making. You're going to know what you can afford. You're going to know your monthly payment after talking to the lender, and then you're going to know that they have gone through underwriting and you are good to go unless anything comes up once they got through the details of the process when we're under contract. What he did was he reached out to the lender and he already knew we need all these documents. So now we're waiting for him to give the documents before, and that expectation is there. I'm not looking at any homes until I get this piece of paper. And it was very smooth, and we're still waiting on the process to finish because what you don't want to do is take him into 5, 10 homes on that prequal, only to have to let him down because you know who they're going to blame? They're not going to blame themselves. They're going to blame you because they look at you as the professional, the person who knows what they're doing, and they really lean on you for that.
That's great. And kind of like the way I communicate that to buyers too is I don't want to show you a house that you can't buy. And now you can't buy it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be out of budget. You may not be approved yet. Maybe you have something on your credit report you don't know is there, and we gotta work to get that off, and that might take some time. And this house sells before you can get an offer in. So that pre-approval is going to get us to the green light to put an offer in. So when, not if, when we find the right house for you, we can act on it and make sure we get you the best terms available. The other little like last piece that I'll kind of wrap up with, unless anybody else has anything, is the best solution to I don't want to call them bad, but I'm going to say bad buyer leads, meaning they're not quite ready or they're working on getting pre-approved or they're refusing to sign an agreement or they're refusing to communicate with the lender. The best solution to that is lead generation for others, because there are some buyers that you just can't get across the finish line, or maybe they weren't crystal clear on what they wanted or where they want to be. Or I have a few right now that what they're looking for just doesn't really exist. Like it just is what it is. Like as much as I'd love to help everybody buy a house, unfortunately there are some things out there that just aren't realistic. I have one that wants to be under 250 and in a good area. It's like that's pretty hard unless you're willing to put significant work in. So the first day we spent looking at houses, we were down in Hopewell, and then he said, I don't want to be down here. It's like, well, you either got to pay a little bit more or this is what we're working with to get the things you want to get. And so some of that expectations kind of illuminates itself. Now, sometimes you have to get all the way to showings to do that. Sometimes you can just communicate with follow-up. But that's why we spend so much time focused on lead generation as well, is because that's the best way to solve that problem. All right. Anything else?